Hey, what is up guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So in today's video we're going to take a look at the updated leaked car list as of update 1.42 and 2024. Now if you don't know what the data mined car list was, basically around the time of GT7's release there was a whole data mined car list looking at vehicles that were coming in the future, and this list had a very good track record of keeping track what would be coming to the game. Some of it already has come to the game and some of it just didn't, and some of it obviously was leftover code. Things like Lotus and such, I think we all know pretty much have no chance of coming to GT7. So what this updated list aims to do is completely remove leftover code and such, so things like Lotus you won't see on the list, and only includes cars that seem to have a tie already to GT7, so cars that have a tie to the GT Auto, Brand Central and such like that. Now a big thank you to Pex DJ for pointing me in the direction of this list. I was supposed to do it around about a week and a half ago but just never got around to it. This list is from Charlie Muggins over on Reddit. From what I can gather, he is the guy that started off with the I guess Montreal track leak around about the midpoint of last year. Now I don't know if that's still a thing or that just ended up being Late Louise in the end, who actually knows. So yeah, in terms of the list it is updated as of 2024 and update 1.42. This isn't necessarily going to be the be all or end all. There is other cars that kind of get put in there from each update and stuff like that, but again, as soon as they get put in, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be there and then when it gets put into the game. Same with a lot of these cars. Some of these may never happen in game, some of them may. So again, just take it with a pinch of salt, err on the side of caution. I'm not saying this is all going to be set in stone, I'm just having a look what's been pointed out and put in front of me. So let's get into it. So here is the updated list. As you can see, Charlie Muggins was replying to someone on Reddit. The only thing of interest to me is Lancia 037. All unreleased cars with links to GT7, Hagerty, GT Auto, custom body, steering, etc. listed in-game as of V1.42 or update 1.42. So what he means by this is these cars do have links to the game themselves, hence why things like Lotus and such are completely removed from the list. Now like I said, take it with a pinch of salt. There is some repeating code in here. Some of these cars I just couldn't find any information on at all in terms of being different from things that we already have in the game. Again, cars do typically get added between updates. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to come there and then, and a lot of these cars might not necessarily ever come to the game. Some of these are still left over from the 2022 leak as well. Some of it is updated and new as the updates have kind of rolled out. So let's start off with the top one, the Afila 26. Now this one we pretty much know is confirmed as coming to the game. So the car itself was a partnership between Sony and Honda. They came up with this funky little EV that is just full of absolutely futuristic tech. I believe they are aiming for a real release of 2026 with pre-orders starting I think in 2025. Not too interesting, but it just kind of is what it is. Next up we have the Caterham 7 Superlight R500 from 2012. So if you're from the UK you'll probably know that Caterhams get thrown around in one make races all over the country, and to be honest, for me, I'm genuinely excited about this one. This would be a great addition, especially considering the weekly special events. I feel like this one would fit right in. Next up, Chevy Chevelle SS454 LS6 from 1970. This is a car that I have a ton of memories running in, I believe, Gran Turismo 4. Now, I'm pretty sure it would have been in GT5 and GT6 as well, but I just don't really remember using it back then. But this is certainly a car that I have a lot of sort of childhood memories with, whether that be the likes of the Midnight Club games or the likes of, obviously, Gran Turismo itself. So it would be a great returning addition. Next up, we have the Lancia Delta HF Integrale WRC from 1992. So looking at the list, it looks like Lancia is going to be getting a ton of love with their older rally cars. Up first, we have the Delta itself, very much an iconic car. Now, we'll probably not see it in the Martini livery, obviously due to the age rating of the game and not being able to promote alcohol and such like that. So we'll probably see it in maybe the Repsol livery around that time as well. So yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing this one in. And again, it gives the Celica a bit of competition as well from the sort of Group A era. Next up, we have another Delta, this time the Delta S4 from 1986. Another Group B monster of the era. I believe this one was like turbocharged and supercharged. It was just absolutely ridiculous. Basically an absolute legend of motorsport, to be totally fair. It's one of those cars that when you see it in a game, it absolutely means business. And I cannot wait to see this thing coexist with things like the Peugeot 205 and the Quattro Pikes Peak, which is obviously already in the game. So yeah, another Lancia there. Next up, we have a bit of a confusing one. We have the DeLorean DMC-12 Stage 1 from 1981. So I was a bit confused about this one at first. I was pretty sure we had the DMC DeLorean that was already in the game, but from what I can see, the plate on that one is a 2004 model number. This one, obviously, the original. So it's looking like we are going to be getting pretty much the original DeLorean in game. Very excited for that one, but again, maybe feels a little bit samey. Next up, we have a bit of an outdated supercar. This time we have the Lamborghini Gallardo LP560-4 from 2008. So it is another supercar, thankfully. However, for me, it's just a little bit outdated. We have a lot more up-to-date Lamborghinis than what we're seeing here. A bit of a weird one. I'm pretty sure this one's been on the list for absolutely forever. So whether we'll actually see this one or not at any point down the line, who actually knows? Let's move on next quickly to the Genesis GR1R Vision GT 24. Now, this is one that I feel like I've called out for a long time. So obviously we just got the Genesis VGT in game, and it was a car that I referred to that would almost suit a Group 1 variant. It's something that we've not seen too much of apart from the Suzuki VGT, and it does seem like this will be the case, at least sometime in the future. Now up next we have the GTR 07. Now the only thing I can think this is referring to is the 2007 model Nissan GTR. Obviously we have a bunch of different versions of this car already. We have the Nismo, we have the Premium Edition, which is a more up-to-date facelifted version. It does seem that at some point this one will happen to come to the game, being the sort of original model. But again, that's another one that's basically prehistoric on this list. Continuing on with the JDM vehicles, next is the Impreza Sedan WRX STI 10. So this will be the 2010 model. Essentially, this is what it will look like. Obviously, we do have a bunch of Imprezas already in the game. Can't necessarily say I'm too excited to see this one in game. Personally, my favorite will always be, you know, the sort of original 22B and such. So yeah, pretty cool if you're into this model, but I don't think it's the most popular. Next, we do have cars that a lot of people have been asking for time after time. As soon as Kaz puts those silhouettes up, that is going to be the Evo 8 and Evo 9 MR, GSR 04 and 06 respectively. So in terms of the 04, that is the Evo 8 model. I know a lot of people will be asking for this one. I see it all the time. Where's the Evos? Blah blah blah. To be honest, I am not the biggest Evo fan in the world. I am much more of an Impreza boy, but to be fair, I can understand the appeal. Obviously, we also have the Evo 9, the MR GSR 06, which is obviously going to be a generation above. There isn't too many differences in these though, so I don't know if eventually people are just going to be like, that feels a little bit copy paste. Personally, for me though, the Evo 9 is just the much better looking version of these two. So if I had to choose one, for me, the Evo 9 I would totally take over the Evo 8 that they're on about putting into the game. So again, I think these ones have been around for a while. Next up, moving away into something completely different and obscure, the M2 1001 from 1992. Now, I did not have a single clue what this was, but upon doing some research, this is what appeared. It seems to be some type of obviously modified Mazda MX-5, Roadster Miata, whatever you want to call it, of the original generation with the pop-up headlights, my absolute favorite generation. So it does seem that it's going to be, you know, a more specced out, one-off obscure Japanese version, which I absolutely love. For me, it's always the best thing about even the early GT games is these obscure Japanese cars. Next up though, we have the Quattro S1 from 1986. Now, I couldn't pick on whether this would be the road going version, but when obviously you type in the car name, this is what came up. Now, it's a bit confusing considering we have the Pikes Peak version in, which is okay, a little bit different, but this one just feels a bit copy paste for me. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the Quattro of the time the Group B legend. But again, it will absolutely be fantastic seeing this coexist with the S4 at some point down the line. Absolutely excited for that one, but again, a little bit too copy paste. Next up, the R18 TDI 11WR. Now I couldn't find anything on this one, and I'm pretty sure we already have this car in game for like 3 million credits. Yeah, a little bit of a weird one. Can't really tell what they're going for with this one, and this is one of those ones that I feel like it's just a bit of a repetitive one, so unsure about that one exactly. Next up though, we do have a very cool one in my opinion, the R31 Skyline GTS R from 1987. The R31 generation of Skyline for me is sort of the generation that just gets zero love at all, but I absolutely love the boxy design on this one. And obviously we do have a super silhouette from around the same time as well, so I wouldn't think it would be too difficult to kind of make that into a road going version. Could certainly see this one coming into the game, and it's certainly a car that I would be extremely hyped for. I feel like there's going to be a ton of cool builds if that one does end up appearing. Next up, we have the Audi R8 V10 Plus from 2016. This is one that I always assumed we actually had in game, but I believe we actually only have the older generation of the Audi R8. So this is sort of the, you know, facelifted, more up-to-date model. Certainly a car that kind of needs to be in pretty much any racing game. I've driven one myself, and whilst I wasn't a huge fan of the car, you know, again, it's a, you know, pretty staple of any sort of racing game in my honest opinion. Next up, we have the Rally 037 Evo 2. If you don't know what that's referring to, it's referring to the Lancia 037 Evo 2, the obviously rally spec version. I know there is sort of road going versions as well. So obviously it's the absolute legend. Now this one would make sense releasing this month, considering there's that whole Group B rally movie that's just released. I think Lancia versus Audi. Definitely seeing the Audi and the Lancia released together in the same update would be fantastic. Please just do that this month, Polyphony. That'd be absolutely awesome to see. Next up, we have the RGT 42 2016. Now, I've always been confused on how to pronounce this one. Rough, whatever you want to call it. It's basically a tuned up Porsche from 2016. Absolutely love the style on this one. I couldn't find too much information on this specific year model, but this seems to be the closest bet that I can find. Absolutely awesome looking thing, and obviously they do have a massive history in the older Gran Turismo games. I believe we only currently have one, which is the CTR3. Okay, moving back to the more Japanese cars, we're going to have two Mazdas in a row. We've got the Mazda Roadster RF VS18. If you don't know what this one is, it's basically the Mazda Roadster with the hardtop roof. So yeah, definitely my favorite version of this vehicle, but we've already had one post launch and we already had the original in from launch. So yeah, not too much of a fan of this one, not too keen on seeing yet another Mazda in the game in terms of the Roadsters, but we also have another one on the list which actually makes sense considering it's a completely different generation, mainly the generation 3. So this is the Roadster RS 2007. As you all know, this is the third generation of the Roadster, Miata, MX-5, whatever you want to call it. Again, just kind of leaves out only a single generation from the game, which will be the Gen 2, which just hasn't appeared at all yet, and it isn't on this list, unfortunately. Next up, we have another Mazda though, so 3 in a row. This is the RX-7R from 1991. Now, we already do have an RX-7 in the game. I believe it is of a later generation, something like a 97, something like that. The 91 version, just a little bit different in terms of its styling. Personally, I absolutely love the style design on this early generation of RX-7. Certainly a car that I would be excited to get into the game. Whilst okay, it's a bit copy-paste job, I do absolutely just love that early design of those RX-7s. Next up, another weird one. This is the S15 Silvia Spec R Aero 02 RM, or racing modification. Now, you're going to see an image of a classic Gran Turismo model of this car. As you can see, pretty much the exact same as the Silvia touring car. So not too sure how this one's going to fit in. Bit of a weird one. Probably will never ever see this in game. I just don't think so anyway, considering we pretty much already have a more up-to-date different version of this. Next up, Skoda Vision GT 2023. Now this is the one that is a bit weird for me. Skoda said this car has no input in terms of Gran Turismo. It's not part of the VGT project, and it will never ever be in a game, but there it is on the list for some reason. Not quite sure if they backpedaled on that and kind of want to, you know, jump into Gran Turismo. It would mean a new manufacturer in the form of Skoda, though. From what I can gather, it's an EV version of one of their classic race cars, so a little bit unsure about that one. Next up, another fairly boring one in my opinion, the Audi TTS Coupe from 2009. So a different generation of Audi Coupe, or TT should I say. Personally not a fan of this. I'm always going to be a fan of the original over any of the others. We already have that one in the game. Yeah, not too bothered about this one. A fairly boring pick of the bunch, if I'm totally honest. Moving on to something a little bit different. I believe this one's been around for absolutely forever in terms of the leaked car list. The Bugatti Type 37A from 1928. This would definitely be a very weird car, and all they really need to do to make these cars useful is give them a place to race. With the kind of big Mercedes tank car that basically exists, this will be fantastic to go alongside. Absolutely love these more weird and wacky vehicles coming to the game. Would definitely love to see this classic Bugatti enter the game at some point, as long as it's treated correctly. Next up, we have Volvo. So I didn't think I'd be saying this one. It's probably not the Volvo I would have picked. I'd have loved one of the old BTCC cars, preferably the Estate, the V40 T5 R Design 13, and this is what it looks like. So yeah, I absolutely love this I guess body style on these Volvos. However, I couldn't really see this one being too much use. A fairly basic vehicle overall, and again, if I'd had to pick any Volvo, it would have been that old BTCC Estate from way back when. Next up, we have the Vantage 18. So it seems that we're going to be getting an updated Aston Martin Vantage. So in terms of the updated design, not too bad. Again, maybe a bit samey for some people that, you know, kind of see Aston Martins as all the same. Obviously that's not necessarily true, but we would be getting obviously an up-to-date Vantage in game, which totally makes sense. It always makes sense to keep the cars as up-to-date as possible, at least in terms of the model, not necessarily the actual year of it. Next up, we have a run of two BMWs. We have the 2002 TII 75 and then the 2002 Turbo 74. So let's look at the 75 first. From what I can gather, this is just more of a, you know, standard road going version. I absolutely love this design on these older BMWs, by the way, and just seeing the more, I guess, road going plainer version is absolutely fantastic. For me, this would make a great car up against the Giulia that we also have in game. So next up, we have the 2002 Turbo 74. This is probably the version that most people will know when it comes to the 2002. In terms of its styling, it's absolutely iconic. Definitely more of an aggressive approach to this car. So as you can see, definitely got those sort of, you know, typical BMW colours on. Absolutely love this car. It's been in a ton of racing games over the time, and it would only make sense that it does end up in the game. A lot of these cars, though, very much ringing those similarity bells. Next up, we have the 430 Scuderia from 2007. This one I remember seeing way back when the list first came out, so who knows if this one will actually come. Again, bit like the Gallardo, feels fairly outdated in terms of actually coming to the game, but it probably will, you know, who knows. So obviously it's the Scuderia version of the 430. We do also have, I believe, this standard version actually in game as well, so difficult to get too hyped over one of those older Ferraris. Next up, we have one that I am definitely excited for. If this one comes to the game, I will absolutely lose my mind. The 500e from 1991, obviously a Mercedes-Benz of the era of the big bulky Mercedes of the time. Absolutely love this one. I feel like it would go fantastic with the Mercedes that we had back in November. For me, it's just a timeless design. Big, brutish, boxy Mercedes. Absolutely fantastic looking cars. Whilst yes, okay, they look outdated, I just think it's just an absolutely amazing design to these vehicles. Next up, we have the 812 or the 812 Superfast from 2019. Again, another one that I'm pretty sure has been on the list for the longest time. Again, it just feels like there is other Ferraris I would rather have over this one. But again, it's a decent addition to the game. I know a lot of people will absolutely lose their heads for this one. For me personally, some of the other more up-to-date Ferraris would have been definitely more fitting in terms of just being more track orientated in a track racing game. Next up, and finally, we have the 911 Turbo S from 1993. Now, I know things like the Carrera 73 and stuff like that were on the list. I cannot remember for the life of me if this one has always been there, but this will obviously be the turbo version of that earlier generation. I believe this is the only generation that we don't necessarily have the more sporty versions for. So again, that is going to complete the list of the updated elite cars as of 2024 and update 1.42. So there's the full list once more. These are all the cars that seem to typically have links to GT7, hence why things like Lotus and such are not gone. 34 cars in total, so if anyone says that they're basically done with GT7 at the minute, I'd kind of err on the side of caution. Let me know what you think down below, and a big thank you to all of my channel members: Lewis Vieira, Old School Gamers, Crazy Cobra, JRO49, Carl Wyatt, Phil Wilmot, Dominic Saylor, Dan, Sean and Chris 75572. Massive thank you for your continued support, and welcome Lewis to the channel members, as well as the other guys, Old School Gamers and Crazy Cobra, who have joined in the recent days. Thank you for your support. If you want to keep up to date with everything to do with Gran Turismo 7 and more Gran Turismo related content, feel free to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Take care guys, peace.